Hi, welcome to the next lesson in Was This God's Idea? A series on the creation account of Genesis, points, counterpoints, and implications. We are still in part two, where we are looking at four views on creation, evolution, and intelligent design. And we are now to the final one, which is the intelligent design portion. So, to start with intelligent design, let's go back through a short history lesson to start with, a very recent history lesson starting in the 1980s. So in 1984, you had three scientists that published the mystery of life's origin, about their work on the mystery of the origin of digital information encoded along the spine of the DNA molecule. In 1987, you had a Supreme Court decision that prohibited the teaching of creationism in public schools. In 2004, we had another case in the Dover case involving a school board, and the ACLU was involved, where the court struck down the teaching and or use of supplemental materials related, I just see that related is misspelled, sorry, to intelligent design. So there's lots of aspects of that case that have been unpacked and debated in recent years. Very soon after that, the Wall Street Journal published an article about Richard Sternberg of the Smithsonian Institute. And this was an article about Sternberg, who was at the time an evolutionary biologist who was punished for the publication of his peer-reviewed article on intelligent design. Not long later, a few years later, the film Expelled came out, which was the feature movie about Sternberg, and it starred Ben Stein, who some of you will know from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Bueller, anyone? Yeah, that's Ben Stein. So anyway, that movie came out in 2008. 2009, Stephen Meyer wrote Signature in the Cell, and in 2013, he came out with another book called Darwin's Doubt. So we will be using Stephen Meyer's position here, and he's a member of the Discovery Institute, to present the intelligent design case. So there's the debate underlying this debate. And so let's look at the sides that we have. You have opponents of intelligent design who basically say it's just biblical creationism repackaged. It's a religious fundamentalist movement, and it's pseudoscience. It's just creationism in a cheap tuxedo is one of the phrases they use. And they want to label it and make sure people understand in their eyes that it's just another form of the creation story in Genesis. Advocates for intelligent design will contend that it's not based on the Bible at all. And in fact, when you read their articles and read much of their information, there is no interpretation of Genesis. So it's interesting that we're including it here in this series of different views of creation. And the reason is because it presents such an alternate view that both creationist and evolutionist attack it from two different sides. They would say it's based on recent scientific discoveries, and it's focused on observed complexity and information-rich structures within living systems. So why is this a controversy? What's controversial about intelligent design? Well, it does not challenge evolution as change over time, and it does not even challenge the idea of common ancestry. What it does do is challenges very specifically the Darwinian idea that biological change is blind or undirected in the processes that we see. So that means we need to go back just a second and unpack a little bit about Darwin and design. So we had Charles Darwin, who famously, his work is very well known. In 1859, talked about how living organisms appeared to be designed, but had this mechanism called natural selection. And that mechanism acted on random variations which mimicked design, but also simultaneously made a designer unnecessary. So, and you'll have other scientists that talk about this idea that it appears to be design, but really we don't need a designer because of the way it works naturally. Challenges along the way came up because of the scientific insights into the complexity of biological information. So there were challenges to this original Darwinian theory. And so the theory then resurged in the 1930s and 40s as neo-Darwinism with a twist. And natural selection, acting upon a special kind of random variation, genetic mutations in particular, could account for the new biological forms and structure. was the case that they were making. So basically, through these mutations, which are essentially copying errors along the way, you can have the process of evolution occur. So then we talk about DNA and design, and Watson and Crick and their work. And so what was discovered is that strings of precisely sequenced chemicals called nucleotide bases store and transmit instructions for building the crucial protein molecules and machines needed for cells to survive. And sequence of these bases along the DNA convey precise instructions for arranging amino acids that make up proteins. So all of this was being discovered and learned. And here is the intelligent design, one of the intelligent design arguments to make sense of this. So what you see there is a random combination of letters, randomly sequenced. And we could look at that and say, yes, it does possess information. There is information there. We know that those are different letters, and there's punctuation marks. And so there is information there. Whether we can do anything with that information or make sense of it is a different story. When those are rearranged in a certain order into a legible, understandable, intelligible statement, I can do anything with quotations. Now we see that it contains functional information. So when we're talking about functional information, what we're saying is that it communicates purpose and or function, and it contains specificity. So we can make meaning and make sense of it. Intelligent design argues that the sequence of information that we find in DNA and in the molecules is just like that. So it's evidence of a designer. Further discoveries in the 1960s illustrated that the information in DNA and RNA is only part of a more complex system. Building new life forms from simpler pre-existing forms, or even if you want to go back and talk about the first cell being made from non-living chemicals, all of this requires new functional information. So their argument would be that if you want your computer, for example, to perform a new function, then you have to give it a new code, software instructions, some kind of coding that tells it what to do. Now, Darwinian theory has this idea that natural selection, acting on random mutations, can accomplish this by providing DNA information necessary to generate new life forms. And it can be done naturally or just materialistically. Neo-Darwinism and genetic information then. So new genetic information arises when random mutations occur in the DNA of existing organisms. So Neo-Darwinism comes up with this idea of how the mutations can actually get us there, while intelligent design says that's not good enough. When Neo-Darwinism talks about random in the evolutionary process, it is without respect to functional outcome. These mutations can confer a functional advantage by chance, is what they argue. Resulting changes are passed on to the next generation by natural selection. And as these changes accumulate, features of a population can change over time. And there you have your evolutionary process. So the question to the intelligent design community then is, so what's the problem with this? Well, their challenge to Neo-Darwinism basically says that natural selection first has to start out with something to select to begin with. And there must be new genetic information for building proteins for there to be anything advantageous to select. So without direction, if this is all left to chance, the mathematical possibility of nucleotide bases in the DNA or amino acid sequences, which build up your proteins, grows exponentially as the length of the required gene or protein grows. So mathematically, it can be illustrated like this. If you had a 2 amino acid combination, and you have 20 different ways that you can have amino acids, so in 2 different positions, so that's 20 in one position and 20 in the next, that's 20 squared of the possible combinations you could have, or 400. So if that became a 3 amino acid combination, it's 20 to the 3rd power, and a 4 amino acid combination is 20 to the 4th power, and so on. And so you see that this just builds, and exponentially these numbers climb. And most functional proteins are actually made up of hundreds of amino acids. So that presents what intelligent design theorists call a combinatorial search problem, which is a fancy way of saying it's a problem of being able to find the right combination. So a quote from Stephen Meyer in Four Views on Creation, Evolution, and Intelligent Design explains it like this. Thus, for even a single relatively simple functioning protein to arise, the mutation selection mechanism would have time to search just a tiny fraction of the total number of relevant sequences, 1/10 trillion trillion trillionth of the total possibilities. That is, the number of trials available to the entire evolutionary process turns out to be incredibly small in relation to the mind-bendingly large number of possible sequences that need to be searched. The size of the relevant spaces that need to be searched by the evolutionary process dwarfs the time available for searching, even taking into account evolutionary deep time. Therefore, the conclusion that intelligent design theorists reach is that the random search required would likely fail to produce even one new functional DNA sequence in all of Earth's history. And building new plants and animals requires many new proteins, not just one. Therefore, the neo-Darwinian mechanism of mutation and selection is insufficient and inadequate to produce new life. Now, I am going to end there and just want to close by saying I left a lot out. This is a very incomplete presentation of the intelligent design theory and view. They really get into lots of different scientific pieces of this, the irreducible complexity argument, the chemical evolutionary theory, and getting back into the work of Stanley Miller and the Miller-Urey work in the beginning, trying to replicate the beginnings of life. And also, the chemical evolutionary pieces. So I'm going to leave it there and wrap it up there and just understand that the main argument that I've presented is only the mathematical part about the information that is required for the process to work. So what do you see as the strengths and weaknesses of the intelligent design position? What questions are raised or answered for you by this position? Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day.